Hello everyone, Mege here. First of all, I wanted to thank all of you guys for all the comments you left under my For Honor's Dilemma video. As mentioned in that video's pinned comment, I'm making this video to answer the most common buts and ifs, let's say. Of course, in this video I won't be covering the I agree with you or good job Mege comments, but that doesn't mean I didn't see them. I'm very glad you guys commented and thank you very much. Alright, let's get to it while we roll some Dominions gameplay in the background. So first of all, I still see a lot of misinformation about 400 milliseconds lights, so here are some comments that talk about them that I want to address. Let me say right away that this is not a witch hunt, I'm just discussing these comments. So, it is clear as day that 400 milliseconds lights are one of the things the For Honor community complains about the most. Behold, the miracle here doesn't give us really any reasoning behind this comment, but there is plenty others who do. Let's tackle what Solero Fastora says about them first. 400 milliseconds lights are not a problem at all, they can be easily parried in high level matches. This is, straight out, false. 400 milliseconds lights, when delayed, are non-reactable. Even the best of reaction-wise players, Ravelord Servant, cannot reliably parry them at all when delayed. So again, 400 milliseconds lights are not reactable. You cannot see them coming and parry them on reaction. If you are expecting them, you are anticipating them without knowing. On the other hand, let's look at Blake Grimes' comment here. 400 milliseconds are an issue for those of us who play on console. They are literally unreactable at 30 FPS. Again, this is wrong. 400 milliseconds lights are unreactable both on console and on PC. They're unreactable on Xbox, on PS4 and on computers. In fact, we're going to talk about the difference between console and computer in a bit. But first, let's finish talking about 400 milliseconds lights. There are other comments talking about them, but they basically boil down to the same things. 400 milliseconds lights are unreactable by default. They are supposed to be, that's how they were designed. To deal with them, you have to predict or guess, which is the term a lot of people use to discredit the mind game part of fighting games, and that is a good thing. Guessing is part of fighting games. If all attacks are reactable, if you could see all attacks coming, then what's the point? Like, just imagine in your head a raider who only uses heavies. Just heavies, no unblockables, no feints, just heavies. You can see all of his attacks easily. How is the match going to evolve? How is he gonna get any damage in when you can't see and react to all of his options? This problem is particularly exacerbated by For Honor's mechanics because heroes don't have that many options to begin with. Their move list is very short. Joe1807 Fly actually talks about how 400 milliseconds lights actually enforce the turtle meta, and I'm sorry, but this makes no sense. Having access to unreactable attacks, unreactable offense, is what actually allows us to attack instead of just looking at each other because we are too afraid to throw out anything, because anything can get parried and punished heavily. So the usual response here is, why do we need unreactable attacks? I don't want to play a guessing game, I'm playing For Honor, I'm not playing rock paper scissors. And while I can understand that sentiment if you're new to fighting games, I want you to ask yourself, like just this once, ask yourself, how would you do it? How would you balance the game without having unreactable attacks? Just think about it. I've thought about it a lot. And in my opinion, it just doesn't work. It makes no sense. And if you think, well, just remove 400 milliseconds lights, well, they're not the only unreactable stuff. Delayed unblockable feints are usually unreactable. Some bashes are unreactable. So what do you do about those? Do you just remove all of those as well? Why are some unreactable actions okay while others are not? It's honestly a very interesting question, I think, and I'm really curious to see what you guys come up with. Okay, it's time to address the elephant in the room. Consoles versus PC. A lot of you complain about how consoles is so different from PC, how 30 FPS makes a huge difference, how Orochi is OP there, so everything I said, the tier list doesn't really apply to console. Mind you, this is not without reason. Playing on console is actually pretty awful. Let me explain myself. 30 FPS, for starters, don't make that huge of a difference. Between 30 and 60 FPS, the difference in timings on attacks is around 10 to 15 milliseconds. It's really so small, it's not noticeable at all. What is noticeable is the difference in smoothness of animations, but still, 400 milliseconds lights, hear me out here, 400 milliseconds lights are still unreactable on console and PC, and 500 milliseconds lights are still reactable on console and PC. Does console have a harder time? Of course they do, for other reasons, but let's stick to this for the moment. Of course they do, but the tier list still applies since the difference in timings is so negligible. Do you know what actually makes it awful to play on consoles? First, latency. Almost all console players play through Wi-Fi. Lots of packet loss, higher latency, lot of janky animations due to lag. Secondly, setup. Both your controller, wireless controller, and your TVs, even on game mode, have a considerable amount of input lag. There is a reason why in tournaments they always play on monitors with low response time. All of these factors together makes the experience on console so much worse, but at the same time you can fix most of this. Get a low response monitor to play on, a wired controller, and connect your console through an Ethernet cable. So, overall, with a proper setup, the difference between console and PC, while still there, is negligible. So, unreactable attacks are still the same on both platforms, the tier list and the hero placement in it still apply on both platforms. But, again, playing on console is also worse than playing on PC. I agree, you agree, everyone agrees, I don't think anyone thinks otherwise. So, on to another very common type of comment about balance. I guess since my video was perceived by some as a big git good, some people are like, well Mege, alright, I can git good, but what if I play Shugoki against Berserker? If I lose, is that really because the other player is better than me, or just because the hero is so much stronger than Shugoki? And I mean, of course, it could mean both things, they could be a better player, or they could have just won because they use a better hero. But honestly, what is the point? Everyone agrees that Shugoki is a bad hero. The whole point of the tier list is to give the heroes a sort of power ranking. Berserker is top tier and Shugoki is bottom tier. So, do I agree the game is imbalanced? Of course I do. I'm not sure why anyone would think otherwise. Yes, Shugoki is super bad. A competitive Shugoki will never win against a competitive Warden, for example, or Berserker. Do I also think the game is being handled poorly on the balance side? Yes, I do. I think the developers are not using enough competitive data. I also think they're being too slow and not transparent enough. But I really don't understand what all of this has to do with my last video. In that video, I wasn't saying at all that the game is balanced. What I was saying, to make it very simplified, is that if you think Orochi's top tier is the best hero in the game because of light spam, and then you see Setmix, a competitive player's tier list, and Orochi is actually not even top 10, instead of saying Setmix doesn't understand shit, you should say, hey, maybe Setmix understands the game better than I do. Let's see and ask him out, why does he think Orochi is not that good? Sorry about the little rant, but all of this balanced comment really caught me off guard. Alright, enough with the general approach, let's go for single comments now. Anko's Crew says, when you say top level, you are referring to PC, cause all of us console players have the exact same complaints and we need balancing. Now that's just wishful thinking. The console player base as any player base by the way, has a huge skill spectrum with different complaints at all level, and I'm sure if you ask two guys right now, they're gonna have different ideas of the game. So, I'm sorry, I'm afraid you can't really balance around the community feedback overall, since they really don't have one single big feedback. I mean, you can just check Reddit, there's so many different opinions there. So, I also wanted to highlight this one comment, since I really think it showcases the wrong attitude I was talking about in my other video that some people have towards the game, towards others' opinion, in this case competitive players' opinion. John Highway completely disregards whatever Setmix said in his competitive tier list and instead states as fact that the Vulin are a billion times better than the old cast. All of them. Honestly, these shut my ears, you're wrong, I'm right, my opinions are fact. It's a really bad approach that you shouldn't have in this game, but anyway, I've already talked about this enough in the other video. Tristan here, while agreeing with me, doesn't think glitches and exploits should be used to determine the balance of a hero. And I agree, honestly, like I dislike Crushing Charge for example for Warlord. I think that's the example we are thinking about here, right? Warlord is considered top tier because of one simple move, a locked Crushing Charge, being so good and so safe. Does Setmix think Crushing Charge is good for the game and should stay like that? Let's ask him out. Exactly. But still, since the competitive tier list needs to be as accurate and objective as possible, and since Crushing Charge unlock is in the game, it's present into the game, and Warlords at top level play can utilize that move, it is right for it to be analyzed, and thus Warlord's placement is correct. Cameron Bland points out that when facing someone with a ping of 60 or above, the game becomes damn near unplayable, making remarks such as "you have to improve" not really make any sense. That is true, facing a lagging player is a horrible experience, doesn't really give any indication of your skill or your opponent's skill, but at the same time these are like rare case scenarios that don't happen all the time, I hope, otherwise you might be the problem, and thus are of course considered exceptions and don't really apply to my topic in the other video. I found SJman comment very interesting honestly. He says, I'm gonna read it. Of course the game should be influenced by the high levels, but you have to remember that just because something is manageable at high level doesn't mean it's not broken. Now, this is a weird premise here. I'm trying to think of something that applies to this and nothing really comes to mind. I assume he is referring to Conqueror Shield Bash, for example. He continues, I think you are conflating the idea that people are not willing to learn versus things that might need to be changed. When you do this, you make it seem like there are just a bunch of noob trolls over the forums complaining and that they haven't gone into practice mode and looked up a video on how to deal with gimmicks, like the Orochi light spam. Well, a lot of people go into forums and communities like Reddit to actually complain about stuff and seek validation. You go there, you post how Orochi just bet you and he's OP because of the light spam that you just mentioned, by the way. And other people will chime in and say, yeah, Orochi is OP because they had a similar experience, they're all on the same level maybe, and Orochi just destroys all of them. They're on a similar experience and they all will say Orochi is OP and you will feel validated. You know, there's this sort of brain mechanism that gives you satisfaction when this happens. Very few people actually go to the forums to ask for tips. This one comment is a very common one, I've seen this quite a lot and it kinda hurts me inside a bit. So Texaco here says, I don't think that the pro player's opinion should weigh higher than the normal player, as pro players are a very small percentage. If the game is only balanced around top players, then it will be unbalanced. As I said, there is many other variations of this comment, I'm gonna try and give it a proper response, general response. I don't usually like making analogies, but let's for the sake of the argument make one here. Let's compare For Honor to basketball. This will be a very simplified example, but let's compare the pro players of For Honor to the pro players of basketball. Let's say Satmix is Michael Jordan, okay? Michael Jordan can slam dunk like crazy and with ease. But pros are not the only one playing basketball, right? Of course not, there is also a plethora of other players that vastly outnumbers them. Among them we have Bob here. Bob has only recently started playing basketball and he's not very good yet. He can't slam dunk at all, for example. Actually, just like Bob, the huge majority of basketball players cannot slam dunk. So what should be done in this scenario? Do we lower the baskets so that everyone can slam dunk more easily? Of course we don't. Games are balanced around the top players because under the top players, all of the huge skill spectrum, this is something I said already, from Bob to an semi-professional player, all of them can still improve, their room to improve and become like a top player. On the other hand, top players cannot lower their skills magically. A common response to this is, hey, but what if Bob can never become Michael Jordan? He's not tall enough, he's not fast enough, he's not skinny enough maybe. Or in For Honor's case, for example, he doesn't have enough reaction time. And you know what? That's okay, that's normal. Not everyone can be a pro basketball player, and in the same fashion, not everyone can be the best player in For Honor. I don't want to drag this on too much, I think the example is pretty clear. Let's get back to For Honor. As a kind of follow-up, we have Therius here saying, there is a point where you will reach a wall blocking you from improving skill-wise. The only way then to improve is to switch your main and play a top-tier character. But what is the point of playing a game if you're not doing what you want? There is no point. I honestly relate to this. In all video games, I always main the characters that I like and not the ones that are top-tier. I've always played Warden in For Honor, even when it was pretty bad, always played Nightmare in Soul Calibur, Ike in Smash Bros, Akuman in BlazBlue. And that is perfectly fine. As an example, Zero is the best Smash Bros 4 player and he doesn't use the top tier Bayonetta, but he uses Diddy Kong. Of course, Diddy Kong is still crazy strong and using a character who is lower in the tier list will make it harder for you. But that does not mean you have to play a top tier characters to do well in competitive scenarios. Therius also asks a question, he asks, what does competitive even mean? To be better than the majority of the player base? Sorry if I explained this in another video and so on. So basically, competitive players are those that actively take part and do well in tournaments and scrims. Igor F says that if light spam isn't a problem at high level play, why not just get rid of it? Competitive players won't notice, the rest will be happy. Balance won't suffer. I'll quote the Arbiter from Halo 3 and say, where it's so easy. Removing light spam is not as simple as simply pushing a button and hey, light spam is no more. Console players are now happy. Usually, the vast majority of balance changes done to the game will affect all level of play regardless. Removing light spam seems to be one of those. Freddy the Gamer says, well, some top players might have problems with Orochi and say he is OP, and an average player might not, so it doesn't really matter, only what the top players think. Well, Freddy, you see, it's not like all top players share the same very opinion, but at the same time their opinions tend to be quite similar and, in fact, the competitive tier list is based upon the opinion of various top players. If a top player has problem with Orochi, then he's probably not a top player. We're going to finish with Enzo Attori's comment, an Italian fan, which is asking: in practice, you talk about the fact that the Ubisoft team makes the right changes to the characters, but despite this, a part of the community complains about some characters being OP. That is not right. I do not think Ubisoft is handling the balance very well, but at the same time the community is kinda harsh on any change they make. But besides Ubisoft balance, I think the community should be more open and listen to the competitive top players' opinions. Me and Henzo pretty much agree on the rest of the comment here. At the end, he asks me, out of curiosity, the cover of the water level of Super Mario 64 that I used in the other video, did I play it? In that case, congratulations. I didn't. There was an old remix I found in my old hard drive simply called Dire Dogs Remix, so I couldn't really even link to a proper author, but at the same time, you know what? I can play Dire Dogs on piano, and I'm going to play it for this outro. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Do leave any comment with more questions or doubts. I hope you have a good day. I'm going to see you all next time.